Welcome to the Business of Family Conversations and Circles series podcast, where we hold important conversations with experts on family enterprises. Family businesses contribute to 90% of Africa's GDP. In addition to being wealth and employment generators, family enterprises are also unique in that they are owned or managed by families. The interplay between the family, ownership, and enterprise systems is what we talk about in the Business of Family Conversations and Circles series podcast. I am your host, Wanjami Chuki, a family enterprise coach, consultant, and advisor, and I am delighted to welcome you to today's episode. Please share, subscribe to this channel, and to our website at www.bbold.co.ke and give us your feedback on what resonated the most with you. Welcome back to another episode of the Business of Family Conversations and Circles series podcast. Today I am joined with my colleague, dear friend, and family systems expert and coach, Carolyn Gagaba. We recorded two, so we're having a laugh about that. But today we're going to be talking about emotional cutoff. This is a continuation of the last episode that we recorded. And emotional cutoff is something that family members do when the anxiety in the family system or the anxiety that is being projected onto this person is so intense that they literally cut off from the family system in order to just exist peacefully, find themselves. And this is something that occurs because family systems do tend to be such emotionally infused spaces. So, Carol, like when we talk about cutoffs, which are taboo, societally they're really taboo. How can we introduce this so that people understand the need for cutoff? Why it comes as the only thing that you can resort to.
Yeah. So cutoff is linked to two things. One is what we were talking about in the previous episode, differentiation. So it's within the family, somebody wants to express or to be a certain way that is authentic to them. And that creates a certain tension within the family because people do not want to be displaced from who they have always thought themselves to be. And so it creates issues. And because most of the time people are not willing to move from their standpoint, then that issue cannot be resolved. And because this person has decided, I have to be myself, I owe it to myself to be myself, then they're like, this thing will never be resolved. So how do I manage an unresolved issue? And one of the ways, which is a bit healthier, is emotional cutoff. And emotional cutoff happens in different ways. So you can decide to cut off all contact with your family, or you can decide to not deal with the issue. So you're physically in contact with the family, but you decide you'll never address that issue. So it's like you're living in a bubble. So you show up for family functions, you show up for family, but you behave as if that issue does not exist. That's a form of cutoff.
Well, that's a very passive-aggressive way of interacting because you're being passive to the reality of something happening in your space. And not communicating is also...
So there are two ways to do that. And this determines whether you're differentiated or you're not.
Right.
So if you're differentiated, which means that you're your own person, you're in your own personal authority, you have your own awareness of who you are and expressing authentically, you can decide that for every moment you're with the family, you will be present to that moment. So you're not really aggressive, even though you're passive. So you're not trying to push any agenda, you're not trying to, because sometimes you have the issue in your head and it's playing out in your head and you're responding to people from that place, and so that's passive aggression.
Right.
But when you're differentiated, you're like, I don't have to deal with this and I don't have to make anyone deal with it.
Right.
Let it just stay there where it is.
Right.
So that is passive. When you're not differentiated, remember, you're still connected to this family in the way of needing them to accept you. And so you're trying to push an agenda, but you have decided that I'm not going to deal with this issue, but it's still playing. So you're still responding from it.
Right.
So you have the anger, the irritation under the surface,
Right.
and you're going to be responding to people from that place. And that's the difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
So self-differentiation is a big part of it. I mean, you probably do need to have some level of self-differentiation to make that decision in the first place.
Yes.
But also, once you do have that cutoff, it again gives you the space to further make sense of a situation,
Yeah.
take a perspective that is away from this enmeshed thinking, the group think
Exactly.
that you're sort of delinked yourself from, right?
Yeah, sort of find yourself. It's like all this issue makes you lose yourself. Lose yourself in the sense that you don't know which emotions are yours or which ones are being projected onto you. You don't know what are your exact thoughts about this issue. So sometimes cutting off gives you that space. But then you have to do it consciously.
Right.
Because there are two ways of cutting off. I see a lot of people cutting off as an escapism mechanism. Like, I can't deal. And they can't deal because they are too enmeshed also.
Right.
To a certain extent. They feel like they're going to explode because this means so much for them. It means so much that people are not accepting me. It means so much that people are not approving of me and my way of being. And it's bothering me so much. And I need this acceptance and I'm not getting it and it's frustrating. So I'm just gonna cut off. That's different from I want to express authentically, I want to be myself, and I see that these people have an issue with that, which has nothing to do with me, but it has everything to do with who they are being and who they are defending.
Right.
And because they're not giving me the conducive environment to be myself, I'm going to protect myself from this because I'm going to create emotional boundaries and mental boundaries, and so I cut off. So those are two different ways, and you're going to have different experiences depending on where you're cutting off from.
Right.
Yeah.
I can completely relate.
Yeah.
As you know.
Yes.
In my experience, my own cutoff, definitely driven by my need to just be myself.
Yeah.
And knowing that the only way that I can be myself is if I separate out of the system.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting, and I'd love for us to talk about this, is following the death of parents, how family system changes, because my cutoff came after that. The dynamic that I found myself in was a completely different dynamic, right? And I couldn't have anticipated this myself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, is this something that we don't, I mean, I see it also in our work.
Yeah.
The more that I work with people who are dealing with estates because a parent or parents have passed on, what I witness is that people don't acknowledge the impact fully of the vacuum left behind
Yeah.
when a parent dies. But also that behaviors then change. People start to behave differently. What is that about?
I mean, even with people not running family enterprises, there's always this way that we relate, especially siblings relate, in relation to the parents. So a lot of the times, our dynamics as siblings are determined by our dynamics with our parents.
Right.
And so when the parents leave the scene, we are left with this dynamic that we have never addressed.
Right.
And sometimes it is so toxic that we are like, we can't handle it. That's the unresolved issue.
Yes.
And because we've never addressed it and it's been there for ages, it's this big. And now the scapegoat has gone. Because we are always saying, Mom is favoring you, Mom is doing this. Mom has always been like the scapegoat that prevents us from dealing with each other,
Right.
in our relationship. Now they're out. So now we have to deal with each other. And it's too big. So sometimes you have to just check out.
Right. As you're talking, I can completely relate
Yeah.
to that, because that's my experience.
Yeah.
And as we were saying in the previous episode, for me it's like a breath of fresh air. In fact, it's almost as if I were in a really stuffy room, and the cutoff has sort of given me this space to breathe in fresh air, to sort of distance myself from the toxicity, from the dysfunction, and not in a way that, well, it's a decision. I think what you're saying is that there's a difference between making a decision, and cutting off but still being in. You still have a leg in.
Exactly, because remember, it's an unresolved issue. So if you're making a decision to cut off, you're first of all making a decision that this cannot be resolved. You see, you have had a conversation with yourself, and you're like, you have made peace, you've done your own work, like you have resolved it from your end. And what you're doing is you're saying, I'm good, and I have allowed them to be who they are. But who they are is not conducive for who I am trying to be and who I am wanting to be.
Yeah.
And so that's the decision I'm making. But when you're running, you're thinking, I don't want to deal with this. There's a difference between this cannot be resolved. It can be like that, and I've given them permission.
Yes, that this is temporary until such a time as, I don't want to deal with this now, but I'll deal with it.
Exactly. Or I want to, because subconsciously some people are doing that as a way of manipulating. So let me not call them and not go there. Let's see what they will do. And let's see, it's an ego trip. Yeah. Let's see what they can do without me. I'm not even going to call them. So it's like you're trying in a way to resolve it by manipulating people to feel a certain way. Because they're going to feel a certain way when you cut off. And you're banking on the way they're going to feel for something to happen in your favor.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes nothing will change.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing I wanted to ask you, like in terms of the issue that is unresolved for you to cut off, what has been your conversation in your head about that this might never be resolved? Because a lot of people are thinking that every issue has to be resolved.
People will change.
Yeah.
So, as we've been talking about self-differentiation, discovering yourself, seeing yourself, accepting yourself, it's a process, right? And as we said, it's a lifelong process. So when, in my situation, I don't expect people inside of my system to change.
Yeah.
There's no evidence of that. Neither is it my place to sort of expect that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to change people.
Yeah.
So there's no space for the coexistence of my authentic self inside of that system. And that was just clear to me after several years after the death of my parents, realizing that, my remaining here means that I sacrifice my authentic self, which I'm not going to do. And so my cutoff, that was a decision. It was very clear to me. and also following attempts to sort of make sense of it,
Yeah.
but it's like a crazy making environment, right?
Yeah.
Gaslighting
Yes.
and what have you, like a very toxic
Yeah.
environment.
Mm.
It's not so different to somebody is married and it's a toxic marriage and they make a decision to leave,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, when I made that decision,
Mm.
I was clear.
Yeah.
I was clear, and I still am. Like I just have. I'm a happier person.
Yeah. It's worth the sacrifice, right?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I feel comfortable inside of myself because I'm like, you be yourselves, be who you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing about kind of being a solution for you dealing with an issue that cannot be resolved by just you or people who are willing to resolve.
Yeah.
It's about that peace, because the resolution is really internal. And there's a way you can resolve any issue internally. And one of the ways is just making peace. That's the way it is. Like the way if you go into
Yes.
a forest and find a crooked tree, you don't bother your head about it. It should have been straight, it should have been like this. You accept it the way it is, with its imperfection and with its crookedness. It's the same way. You come to a place where you realize that things are always going to be like this, and it's okay. Why? Because it doesn't affect who I am. It doesn't affect my choice of who I want to be. Because when it starts to affect how you express, that's where the issue begins.
Exactly.
And that's why it's painful and it's, you don't get peace.
In fact, I feel as though it's a true expression of unconditional love, because when we come back to unconditional love and what does that mean, I worked with clients who were like, what is that? And for me, it's the acceptance of every vibration of a person. Every which way a person is, you just accept them.
Yeah.
So you really are loving them unconditionally.
Exactly.
I think that it's easier when you can do that, to just say that's just who you are. And it doesn't mean that, because I think this is where it gets twisted,
Yeah.
that then I still come into your space accepting.
Yeah.
You can accept and say, you know what,
Yeah.
I love you from a distance.
Exactly.
I think that is the thing with families. You will always have a connection. That DNA
Yeah.
will always connect you. However, having people in your day-to-day life, or having people in your head all the time, if it is not bringing you peace, it's not worth it.
And that's really the mark of differentiation. It's giving you permission to allow others to be who they are, and also giving you permission to choose how to relate with them. You see, in family dynamics, it's like we don't have a choice. We have to relate a certain way. And most of the time, this is what the founders of these families or these family enterprises have set rules about. This is how we show up as a family for each other, and we must, and you have no choice. And that's why you find some people are still entangled. They are like, this person is frustrating me, but they're family. I've heard so many people saying, but they're family now, what do I do? Because they don't feel like they are permitted to decide a relationship dynamic of someone in their family. And because of that, they don't also give themselves permission to be who they are, because part of being authentic is boundaries.
Exactly. And also that abuse happens in families.
Yeah.
Emotional abuse happens in families. Physical abuse happens in families. So if in a non-family context, a person would make a decision to leave, it's no different.
Yeah.
But again, because these are such taboo topics, that and that's why a lot of things happen inside of these family systems that are shrouded in complete secrecy.
Yeah, there's secrecy and no talk rule.
Yeah. And that again is a very dysfunctional I mean, it's a source of so much toxicity, the secrets of what goes on in here. I don't particularly ascribe to that, as you know. I mean, you can't if you're doing this kind of work. But what we're trying to do is to say, look, give every member the space to be authentically self-expressed, right? So that people will also hear, this is how I feel about you. This is how you make me feel.
And actually, that's at the core of issues in a family. You see, a lot of people don't even know how to vocalize what the real issue is. Because one, it's about feeling. It's about feelings. It's not about something you did. It's about how you did what you did. And so there's a lot of gaslighting also in families. So it's like, I just called you, like, what's wrong with the call? You know, it's like you're having your own experience. It's not valid, by the way. You're seeing your own things. You see, and so even addressing these issues sometimes becomes so difficult because what's the issue? Like, what's really the issue?
The way you
and
make
the
me
issue
feel.
is about what you make me feel. And if we don't allow each other to validate each other's experience, then I can invalidate it. Like, I can say, well, that's a you problem.
Too bad.
Too bad.
Or in our cultural way, people take the stance of, what are you going to do? Like, too tough luck. Which is a very, that is a pure invalidation. And you won't find resolution in that kind of language. Actually, I think that one of the things is language, communication. How do you communicate? How do people listen? How do they hear? Empathy. Being able to say, gee, you know, I can imagine
what you're feeling or what you're going through. And there's this thing also, I don't know if you've experienced it, that somebody makes you feel a certain way, which then leads you to respond a certain way. And your response becomes, now you're the victimizer. Like, it's like, let's not even care where you came from with this. This is what you did. You didn't come for the family meeting, or you didn't do this, but nobody cares why you did that. And you're just responding to something that has happened that is a soft issue, you know? So you end up becoming very defensive in the family because suddenly you're the bad person because you responded like this. Because no one will validate where you're coming from.
Exactly. And that leads to the cutoff, because it's like, well, what is the point of then existing inside of the system that refuses to acknowledge your true experience? Also, where people refuse to take responsibility, right? It's also, I think there's a lot of people running away from, I actually did make you feel that way. I really did do that thing, and I made you feel that way, and I take responsibility.
Exactly.
Which changes the whole dynamic.
It does, and it's, when you look at our culture, we are not used to this feelings piece. That's the other thing. Like, you make me feel like that's not a conversation that you in our African context. It's really what most people are avoiding, because it takes a lot of vulnerability to even acknowledge that this is what I feel. Because again, it's about survival. It's about, am I going to be accepted? Will this get me? Am I going to be held, you know, in my feeling? Because how do I start expressing how I feel in my adulthood? And in my childhood, I was not allowed to feel. I was not allowed to even mention anything to do with feelings.
Right.
How do I get to this place where I can say that? Not even saying that. How do I become aware of what I feel? I've had so many clients come to me and I'm asking them, what does this make you feel? And they're talking about what they think. As opposed to what they feel. Because they're so detached with their emotional bodies, they're so detached with their emotional experience. Yet it's the very thing that's driving their existence, their response, their relationships, but they're so detached. So it's a whole thing, and I think that's why we are doing the work we are doing, so that we can reconnect you back to your experience. When you're in your experience, you can begin to accept yourself, because that's where you begin to accept yourself. That you validate yourself first, and then you stand in that experience and say it's a valid experience, and you can voice and say, this is what I feel, this is what you make me feel.
Yeah, and I think that it's so liberating, even in a family setting, when you name the anxiety.
Exactly.
When you name that there is so much anxiety here, so that members who are completely defensive, who do not allow themselves to go into that vulnerable space of saying, I am experiencing anxiety, can do that. It's a release. There's a name for it. And also for family members to realize that you're not experiencing it by yourself. There's no way that anxiety is going to exist without it being felt by everybody. Truly.
We are under the same emotional skin.
No matter how people may think that, how cut off they may think they are from their emotions. And I think this is where it starts to show up. People's addictions, people's behaviors, violence, how people behave is really, you shall know them by their acts, right?
That's true.
Is telling you that there's something stimulating that behavior, and as we had said in our first episode, anxiety is the root cause.
And sometimes when you address your own anxiety and you're vulnerable enough to voice it out as your experience, then you give the others permission to own what is theirs. I just remembered as we were speaking about a conversation I had with my parents. It was really high intensive. First of all, before I initiated that conversation, I just went and did some breathing exercises, because I was like, I'm going to acknowledge my experience to them. So I'm not going to be on the defense that I did this and did this. No, I was just going to put my experience on the table. My experience, I don't know what yours is, but this is mine. And it was very intense. So I sat there and I spoke about what I feel, right? Without putting any responsibility on anyone. And it was so surprising, because what was causing the issue was an issue that my mom had, which was like a traumatic something she had gone through. And in that moment, she realized that she had been acting out her trauma and projecting it on me.
Right.
But it only happened when I owned my part of my experience. And I said, when this and this happened, this is what I felt, and this is what I feel. And this is my responsibility, and I want to own that. So it was like, okay, you've taken your pieces on the table, what's left? The other person has to take their pieces. And it was so beautiful, but I must say it was a very scary experience, because that's like uncharted waters.
I've had the same experience. I mean, it's interesting, and I guess this comes back to, it could go either way. Because I had a similar conversation, no judgment. In fact, I specified this. This is a conversation with no judgment. So it really was about my experience and how I feel. And it completely, it was as if what exactly are you talking about? Denial, right? It was met with denial and a total invalidation of what it was that I was expressing. And so all of that obviously factoring into the decision that it's pointless. I mean, then what are you staying inside of an environment like that for, right? I think also coming back to what families are supposed to be fundamentally in a healthy system. These are spaces of nurturing. These are spaces of protection. These are spaces of guidance. This is where people are supposed to feel belonging. primarily,
Yeah.
before you then step out into society and what have you.
Mm.
So when that is not happening, and really your survival is at stake,
Yeah.
cutoff becomes a very clear
Yeah.
avenue out, or you stay and allow yourself to be decimated.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, that's the other option you have. But then I like how you describe your own cutoff, because this can be a guide for most people. You don't wake up and say, this is not working, I'm cutting you guys off, because that would be escapism, right? You look at how can you resolve it within yourself, first and foremost, by getting as much clarity as possible about what's going on. What's the real issue?
Yeah.
Like, what's the issue? What's my part of the issue?
Yeah.
How can I resolve it within myself? So it's about your perception. It's about your experience. It's about your awareness of your sense of self. And then think about what is within your power to resolve this.
Yeah.
And take that. What is not within your power, can you allow it to be the way it is? Because if you're really in your personal power, then you don't need any other person's power. You don't need to go and grab another person's power, because you're whole.
Exactly.
And when you're whole, you can allow others to be whoever they need to be, because they are not affecting your sense of self.
Exactly.
And so until you get to that point, I would say emotional cutoff won't work for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also think that in the reverse, just as you're saying, a lot of times the cutoff will be because you are in an environment that is trying to take your personal power.
Yeah.
That is sort of trying to take everything that is you about you and suppress it. So that in effect you don't exist.
Yes.
And that does happen. I think also when we talk about systems theory, family systems theory, that siblings are existing and competing for attention.
Yes.
That's systems theory.
Yeah.
And you will find that the emotions that brings up inside of people, that they can't express it. They can't express all the emotions, whether it's jealousy or whatever.
Yeah.
But their instinct is to decimate you.
Yes.
Like, you get out of the way because I want this attention. So when they start to actually do that to you inside of the system, we go back to when the parents are gone, and now what has actually existed
shows up.
Like
this competition we've had that has never been a conversation between us, or we've been expressing it via our parent, then now it's me and you.
And you see the most horrific things happening.
Exactly.
The most horrific things.
Yeah.
So I think here how it shows up is that siblings then end up, people will do it with estates.
Yeah.
You dispossess a sibling.
Dispossess somebody, or just total, like some siblings just totally ignore the other sibling, especially like if one is in authority, you're like, I'm gonna totally dishonor and disrespect your authority. And I don't see you, I don't interact with you. And by the way, this thing of people saying our parent was the glue and then they left, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You guys had issues from the beginning and they were just being taken via this person. And when the person is out, now the real dynamic comes. It's not like they were the glue, they were just abandoned on top of a wound.
In fact, it brings us back to triangulation.
Yeah.
It's a triangulated relationship.
Yeah.
Because instead of the two dealing with the issue that they have, or whoever, it's triangulated through the parent.
Yeah.
And it just creates a chaotic, it's a chaotic system.
Yeah.
But even when the parent dies, something has to replace their place.
Yeah.
Somebody has to become the new scapegoat.
Yeah, exactly.
Or,
Yeah, that's true.
or the rescuer, whatever role they held.
Exactly. Because some parents are a scapegoat, so it's like, let's say for example, you guys don't want to be in each other's space, but your parent says, we have a family meeting. So you go on complaining about the way your mom or your dad is inconveniencing you with these meetings and blah, 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 blah. But the real issue is, I don't want to be in this person's space. Or the other way around, it's like, I have an issue with you and I'm gonna take it to mom or dad. And you're just gonna be like, yeah, I don't like this person. So when now mom and dad is not there, I have to fill in that gap with someone that I can blame or I can take the issues to, because I'm still in avoidance.
Yes.
Of dealing it with you.
So cutoffs can be cutoffs and permanent. Cutoffs can be temporary, but also understanding that chances are you're going back to people, because you cannot influence whether or not they change unless you collectively agree to work on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is what we do at Be Bold, because we're talking about family enterprises and families that have decided that they're going to be together in developing their family businesses. How then do they come to the table and agree to see each other as they are, give each other space to do the personal development work, so that they also come to the core of who they are, and create the acceptance. When we talk about values and establishing what are the values of this family, really, that's what is at the heart of it. So these aren't superficial values. It's values that get to the heart of what will it take for me to honor you? What will it take for you to honor me as I am, as you are? In the family, in the enterprise, as an owner. As somebody who you share something with. What is it going to take to have me acting in your best interests, you acting in my best interests? And it really requires a lot of, understanding that there's an interdependence, but not a codependence.
That's true.
Not that I'm coming to, you have a right to tell me how to think about what I want.
Exactly. And it's to see what really is at stake here, or what really is possible here. Because when you look at the work that you're gonna do as a family, when and if you decide to do this work, it's coming from a recognition of how much potential lies in your family that can be unearthed by doing this work. How far you can go when everyone is expressing authentically. On the other hand, you can look at, in the long run, how much you might lose if you erode each other's sense of self. Some of these enterprises will not go past 2 generations because of that. Because there will be such conflict and such tension and such anxiety that some generations down the line, there will be no enterprise at all. So if you look at it like that, then it gives you a sense of urgency, why you need to do the work.
And again, just as you're talking, as you're, I'm hearing you looking forward, you're looking at the legacy. Again, you still have to look back, because the patterns, if you find that there are family members being isolated in a current generation, there were family members that were isolated in the previous generation. Guaranteed. It's that multi-generational transmission process. So to look forward and find this potential, this collective potential, it's important to also understand the source. Because, people think you only inherit material things, but
There's so much you inherit.
yeah, and again, this is the work that we do when we do our genogram mapping, for people to actually see, oh my goodness, this behavior was showing up in my mom's family. This is something that was happening there. Which is why people then, I think, kind of carry on doing things without an awareness of the impact of what they are doing.
Then it also, the work of going back to see and to uncover the patterns helps us understand that there's an underlying something that is causing us to have these patterns even within our family. So it increases compassion and empathy. And it also helps you begin to love yourself, because you're like, honestly, I'm just an outcome of something. So I can chart my own way. I can break this pattern and chart my own way. And that helps us to even help each other break the pattern. Because if you're showing up like Shushu so and so, I'd rather you show up as yourself if this pattern is going to be not conducive for us. And I'm going to support you in just breaking this pattern, because I see this pattern is connected to my pattern as well. Because the fact that we are together means we have something in common, and we are playing out our subconscious stuff. So when we begin to see it as that, then we can give each other permission.
What, as we close, because this is also something that's really important, cut off, because it's such a taboo thing. When now people are dealing with the reactions of extended family members, for example. Once you cut off, you're cutting off from you cut off from your siblings, you're cutting off from your nieces and nephews. Your aunts, your uncles, because they are likely to project onto you that you are you'll be scapegoated. What would you say to somebody who's in that situation, and just in terms of, well, they're self-differentiated, but how to deal with that, what to expect?
Wow, so if you're self-differentiated, that's a very, let me not say easy, but so somewhat easy than someone who's not differentiated, because you have a very strong sense of self, you're in your personal power, and so a lot of what goes on externally hasn't that much of an effect on who you decide to be. So you're using everything as data, so it's like you're like, oh, okay, that's your choice, okay, fine. So it can be easy for someone who is differentiated. But the most important thing to remember is the same permission you're seeking, the same freedom you're seeking is the same freedom you must grant others. So even if somebody decides to hate you, or somebody decides to be a certain way with you, the more you give them permission, because you have experienced the same permission you've given to yourself, the more free you feel, the more at peace you feel. So that now you know it's about them. It's about them and their sense of self, that it has nothing to do with you. People are self-preserving, and that's why they're treating you the way they're treating you. So again, it's about choice. Depending on your specific family dynamic, it's about choice, because you might find some extended families are so close-knit, others are like very loosely connected. So you might find that the people you're cutting off from are different depending on your different family dynamics. But then always keep the intention to be about you staying in your power, and you really giving the world and the universe the gift of you. And whatever it takes for you to give that gift of you, then it's worth the sacrifice.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think just with those words, the gift of you, if families could actually allow family members to give the gift of themselves as they are, how wonderful I'm thinking of it as a sort of like, it's creativity galore. People can be self-expressed, you can create.
Yeah.
I think life would be so much more interesting.
It would be, but then I think also the gift of you is such a treasure that you have to dig deep for it. And I think the family provides that resistance that is needed for you to get to it and to value it and to treasure it. Because if there was no resistance to it, there would probably not be enough appreciation for it. That's what I feel. Because we're in a duality world.
Yeah.
For us to experience light, we must first know darkness, so that light is appreciated, because it's being seen in the context of the opposite. So it's like the more resistance you experience to being you, the more you will understand the glory and the magnitude and the magnificence of who you are. So in a way, it's a blessing in disguise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there you have it. This is a conversation we could go on with for hours, and I'm sure Carol and I will find the time to do just that.
Yeah.
But for now, I'd like to say thank you, Carol, for this conversation. Thank you to our audience for listening in, and subscribe, share your comments. What is coming up for you? It's really important to engage in these conversations at a deeper level. What awareness is coming up for you when you listen to this, and as you reflect on your own situation? And if you want to work on this, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Stay magnificent, as Carol said, your glory and your magnificence. That is what this work is all about. So until the next episode, in all that you do, do not forget to go out there and be bold.